It's Kathy at My Best Year, and today we are in Sacred Money Studios. I don't know if you guys saw the little video that I posted just about 10 minutes ago that shows you what the studios looks like, but there's all kinds of amazing artwork that you can see here behind us, and pie and artwork and books and greeting cards and jewelry and lots of pottery, very cool things. And I am here with Una.
Hello there.
Whoa, the camera even went.
Wow. We had a moment.
So today we're going to be talking about money, finances. It's been our topic all month. And for me, it's helpful as people come into the room, if you could just type in your name and where you're from, just so I can see that you're there. That's cool. Can you, actually, I'm going to tell a little story about
Fair enough.
how we met. So I was probably somewhere near a year and a half ago, I was in New Renaissance Bookstore, just poking around, killing time. And I came across this book, which you guys have seen, Wild Money. And I thought, dang, this is really cool. To me, it captures the content of money that I think often is not talked about enough. And then it also had a lot of creativity, and it looked very feminine instead of, like some textbook to me. But at the time I didn't have enough money. So
Well, that was good. You didn't buy it because
Yes.
you didn't have the money. I appreciate that.
So I took a picture of it with my phone. And then later, when a friend said she was going to this really neat financial class, I said, well, I've got to share this book with you. And so I sent her a picture of the book. And that is Carrie Ure.
Oh,
And she was like, hello. She, I think, helped with the book.
she was in the
somewhat,
pilot class.
Yeah.
The original class.
And so, number one, always trust your intuition. So it was good that I shared that with her.
Yeah.
But then found out that you were opening Sacred Money Studios. Love that idea. Love all the stuff that you're up to. And so I wanted to make sure that my folks get to talk to you today and find out some neat things from you. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself personally and professionally.
Okay. So I'm an adventurer. I think that's probably a seeker, a person who's always wanted to find ways to wrap my arms around what I love about the world and how I can see myself fitting into the pieces that need to change. So my background is that I was a professional artist I kind of fall into things accidentally, in the sense that I went to school just to get out of school, really. I was like, just let me get the degree that I can get so that I'm done in 4 years. And I ended up with a degree in bilingual education because it basically used all the credits I had and let me get out. And then I traveled the world on a sailboat. And when I came back and landed in Boston, I ran across a pottery studio that had a beautiful piece of silk painting outside the window. And I was like, oh my God, like it was just one of those absolute epiphanies of, I have to do that. And I had never thought of myself as an artist. I'd been a dancer, I'd been a gymnast. I had longed to do art, but I'd never let myself do art. And when I saw that, it was just this like, you got to do that. And so I walked in the door and I said, who did that? I need to meet them. And they gave me her name, and I went to her studio, and in a day she taught me what she knew about silk painting.
Wow.
And I basically started painting on silk, and then said, oh gee, I better go to school for this. And I actually got into art school, which sort of blew me away because I didn't have a portfolio. I had to like make a portfolio out of nothing. And then after a semester, I was like, this isn't it. Like, they're not teaching me what I want to learn. And I was worried that I would get demoralized by the competition and the criticism. And so I just decided to take the money I would have spent on school and teach myself. So that basically launched me into a 12-year career as a professional artist, where I just basically went out and started selling my work. And doing wearable art made it easier to sell. People liked wearing wearing things. So it's like the accessory side of it rather than the painting on the wall is easier to sell. And it was a great journey. When my father passed away when I was 30, I really got a wake-up call to what do I really want to do and how I wanted to be a mom. Like that was so important to me, and I wasn't partnering with people that wanted to be parents. So I had this dilemma going on, and I was like, well, maybe I'll just go back and get a degree, a graduate degree. And so I became a psychotherapist, thinking that I was going in to actually become better at teaching creative process, because that's what I was doing. So I was painting and teaching creative process, teaching people to paint on silk, teaching people a process that comes out of the painting experience, which is kind of process painting. And it's very therapeutic. And I get through that 2 years, I start being a therapist, and I'm like, I don't really like being a therapist. I liked learning about psychotherapy. I liked the engagement of my students, fellow students. I liked the professors and the interactions. And then I get to private practice, and I'm like, this is really boring.
Yeah.
And I can't tell people what to do, and that's really frustrating. Sounds bad, but good therapists don't tell people what to do. And so I recognized that kind of introverted, take it all in and just let people's processes go wasn't my thing. And then I just was like, all right, so what's next? And in the meantime, I was just trying to pursue being a mom, which meant I got divorced. I just started to pursue being a mom on my own, doing inseminations. And I was just like, I'm going to be a mom. Everything else in my life can wait. And so I just, I kind of went off on this other little journey, which is me. And my therapist said, well, you can find companies that will train you. You don't have to go back to school to get a job. And I was like, really? So I looked for a company that would train me. I got a job in tech support and started doing computer tech support.
Okay.
Which seemed irrelevant also. I was like, why? They all fit together. There's a way that all these things came back together. And I think a lot of times I meet people, what they realize, where they can't see yet is they can't like elevate above their picture and see how they all connect.
Yes.
But for me, doing tech support was a very quick lesson in how fast I learn, how much I had a lot of skills in customer service. I didn't know a damn thing about computers, but I learned it very quickly. And then I became the trainer. And then I jumped to a job and doubled my salary and became a supervisor. And what was fascinating was, I'd always been self-employed. And so to kind of play the game of throwing out a salary and saying, this is what I'm worth was just a novelty. I'd never experienced it before. And having benefits in a 401k was also a novelty. Never had health insurance. And then I got pregnant at the age of 39. And finally, yay.
Success.
And that changed a lot of what I cared about.
Absolutely.
At the same time that when my kiddo was 1.5, right when 9/11 happened, was the company laid me off because I was a trainer by then, and they didn't think training was very significant. And I was like stunned. I was like, what? Like you can get laid off? Because I'd always been self-employed. Nobody could lay me off. So I had this like crisis of like, who am I? And what do I want to do? And do I want to go back to being an artist? I don't really want to go back into high tech. That wasn't really very gratifying. And so I really sat back and asked myself, okay, so if I'm not going to be that, I thought about the artist path, and I was like, the only way to really make money there is to teach. And if you're teaching, you're not painting and you're doing other things. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. So I was like, what is it, universe? Like, talk to me. And so I wrote a list of what mattered, and what mattered to me was I wanted to learn how to make $100,000. It was like a challenge. It was just like, can I make $100,000? That sounds fun. I wanted to not commute or have to travel a lot. I wanted to have my office nearby, and I wanted to utilize all the skills I'd learned up to that point. And I remember thinking, it's really okay if I'm not 100% entrepreneurial, but I want that element of entrepreneurialness in there where I get to be in charge of my schedule and how much I make and how much I'm determined. And literally a week later, after really setting that prayer in place, somebody recruited me to financial services. And my rule was I had to say yes. So anything that showed up, my rule was I have to at least explore it. So I get this
If
packet.
it's within the criteria of what
Yeah,
matters
like,
to you.
or even to find out if it is in those
Okay.
criteria, like how would I
Okay.
know, right? And I remember thinking that would be the last thing in my imagination of what I would be able to do, because I didn't know anything about money, and I certainly didn't know anything about investing. And yet it seemed like one of those challenges that sort of inspired me.
You obviously like a challenge. That's very
It was
clear.
like, And so, and I think that it was because so many people in my life were like, what? You're considering what? And I, it's like a dare. It's like, they don't think I can do this. Maybe I'll just show them. And because most people identify with the artist. I mean, I'd been a professional dancer and an artist, and they were like, why would you do that? And I'm kind of like, why wouldn't I do that if I can? So finance services became this place of really understanding the value of structure. It was a very structured process to learn. It was very tangible milestones. I kept winning awards, which was just this novelty because I'd always been self-employed, and it was like,
you don't get awards.
You don't get awards to yourself. I wish. And it's like, hey, good job, girl. And it was also, I had a dashboard that told me how I was doing that month.
Right.
So it was like, how many accounts did I open? How many dollars did I bring in? How many assets did I manage? And it was like, wow, this is really fun. And in about 4 years, I got to the point of making $100,000. And I was like, wow, I'm doing it. And then I started to realize that I'm doing it, but I'm doing it in a company that doesn't align with who I am. A Midwestern, very male company where I was always the kind of out there, colorful woman that walked in the door. And they'd be like, I don't really know what she's doing or how she's doing it, but she's clearly doing it. But I'm not so sure about her. That's what it felt like anyway. That was the story I told myself.
Got it.
And 7 years into it, I said, I've got this book to write. I know that it's time. I don't even know what it's about yet. I do know the name of it. I knew the name was Wild Money, but I didn't know what that meant.
Wow.
And I went to my supervisor and I said, so I've got this book, and tell me what the process is. And she said, well, just write the book and then we'll let you know whether you can publish it. I was like, no, I'm not going to let you tell me whether or not I can publish it. And she said, yeah, I can see why you wouldn't want to do that. So, it might be time. And I was like, okay, then. So I really took this huge leap and walked away from a very comfortable business that managing $50 million in assets, and started all over again across the street from my old office, and learning everything about how to run my own business. I felt like I had my own business in that company, but I had my own office, but I was not self-employed. And there were many things that they did for me that I now had to do myself. I had to make all these choices and carry all this responsibility. And yet I made that move and quickly started writing those books. And so was navigating that entrepreneurship at the same time that I was navigating how to be an author. And
wow,
it was, I'd never been an author before, so I had to learn that all over at once too. But what drove me was that I knew I had something to offer that nobody else was offering. And that when I get to put my own framework around how financial planning could really look, that it didn't have to be a stuffy guy in a suit giving you charts upon charts upon charts of what used to happen in the stock market and say, here.
Yeah.
And
I think you should do.
Yeah, do this. I'm like, I don't want to be that way. I want to educate people. I want them to feel confident. I want them to grow their own capacity around money rather than feel like somebody's condescending and just bullshitting them with a bunch of analytics that make no sense to the person that they're talking to. So as I started to I have to build and develop who I am as a financial planner. So I had also just completed my financial planning certification 6 months before leaving. It was crazy. And so as all those things became who I am now. And then 5 years into that was when I had this vision for Sacred Money Studios. some people would say, can't you just be happy with where you are? And the point of I think the reality is that what I've seen with the books is how many people really needed community. Mm-hmm. That they weren't successful with the books because they weren't in a community. And so when I did classes, people made great progress with the books. And then to this day, today, I get an email from somebody saying, your books have been sitting on my desk for 2 years. Mm. And I haven't had the courage to open them.
Yeah.
And that's the common, like your story, right?
Even though I'm quite a doer, I've started in the book, but
it's a different process.
Yeah.
So as I was teaching classes and recognizing that all these phone calls I was getting from people saying, I need help with getting out of bankruptcy. I need help with saving so I can actually invest in a Roth IRA. Or I have one of my son is 17. His friend just called me and said, I have $100, Luna, and I want to invest. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. I want to help you.
Yeah.
And because where do you go if you're a 19-year-old kid and you have $100? There's not too many places.
Right.
So Sacred Mini Studios became my answer to the fact that 99% of our population doesn't have any place to go, to develop a skill set, a community, a safe place to work through historic baggage, mindset, belief systems, to develop healthy ways of relating to money, and be in a community where everybody talks openly. Learning budgeting, learning things that are the foundational pieces that those with affluence have access to, and those without it do not. And so here I am running 2 businesses and sometimes pulling my hair out because it's stressful. It's a lot. It's a lot to navigate, and yet it's working. It's working in that I see the results. I see the community being built and the transformations that are happening amongst the students here. So it's it was kind of a long answer, but
yeah, you guys opened in May.
We opened in May,
and I've been a student, I think, since a week or 2 after you opened. I came on in and have taken maybe almost every one of your classes.
I like that.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, you might as well take them all, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned that people don't know very much about money. It seems like even women maybe know less. Is that correct?
It's not true, actually.
Okay.
I used to think that.
Okay.
But increasingly, men are equally in the dark.
I think maybe they
act like they're not.
They have confidence, or we think that they're the ones that we should go to for the advice, perhaps.
Well, historically that's been what we've done, right? I mean, historically we have controlled money, both as the advisors, as the managers. I mean, still the world of money management is so predominantly male.
Okay.
There's probably 10 money managers that are women out there right now. It's so rare. It's crazy. Whereas the world of financial advising is really shifting. I would say there's many more like, I would guess that now 30% of the financial advisors in the country are now women. We're finding it a very flexible, it's a demanding career, but it's also a flexible career. You can raise children while you're doing this. You can be in charge of how much you're making. You can, it doesn't suit everybody. I've mentored, I don't know, probably 100 people, and probably just a handful of them actually make it. It's a very tough place. Just like entrepreneurship is a very tough place.
Right.
You have to be confident enough to make sales. You have to ask people for, one of my mentees said, I have to ask them like where all their assets are. I'm like, yeah, like how could you actually advise them if you don't know what they're making? Like you don't need to feel they're expecting you to ask those questions, just like you expect a doctor to say, you're gonna have to take your clothes off so I can look at your body.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of people that just aren't comfortable with that. And so it takes a special personality to be able to do all the different pieces of being a financial advisor. And you do have to relate to people and really work with some tough emotions. So my psychotherapeutic background served me well. Having my little stint in the corporate world served me well because I understand what that's like. I know what it's like to have a stock purchase plan and a 401k and health insurance paid for. Up to that point, I never had.
Right.
So I feel like all those things helped me. And then being an artist gave me the opportunity to be to leverage that creativity and teach other people that the creativity is their gift. It's not a detriment. Being a creative person is not a sign that you will never understand money. It's, the truth is that we've never been taught about money. And so male or female, we've never been taught. Sometimes men are given more access to advisors or tools than we've been given, but increasingly at least in my world, and I think my world's a little odd because most of my clients are women, but in my world, my clients at Lunaria, my financial planning firm, are almost entirely the ones who run the household if they're married to a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating. I see the men sitting back. I see them not in care, like they're disengaging. I'm like, what the hell, guys? You got to step up too. You can't, we don't want it to flip.
Right. We want us all to be.
We want two equal players.
Knowledgeable, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. Get on the same page. Have money dates. People, one of the things that makes me so happy is when I come into the studio, into the pie shop, and people are having a money date here.
Okay, so explain money date. I mean, I conjure up a picture in my mind, but I want to.
Yeah, so a money date could be anything from, I see clients coming in and working on their wild money books together. So they do side-by-side work. They don't necessarily talk about it. Sometimes I advise couples to not talk about it because it's easy to get into your ruts in the way you think and the way you think the other person, especially if there's any tension in the relationship. So I always say, do the work together, and then, but do it separately. So you're sitting down. Your date is you're each having a glass of wine, you're having a piece of pie, and you're doing you're doing your work. But then you bring it into me, and together with my guidance, I'm helping them to see the other person's perspective. So I'm slowing it down and not having that initial reaction that we have, which we often do when we see somebody's drawing or we hear somebody's writing and we say, oh, that's good, which is a judgment.
Sure. Or
why'd you say that? Or, oh, that guy's really big in that picture. Instead of that, what I'm teaching them how to do is to notice. Just notice, just observe, be an observer. So if you can be an observer of your partner's picture, then you can learn how to be an observer of their life and be less judgmental and more curious. So when they start to learn to look at the picture alongside this way, side by side, we're looking at this picture together rather than we're against each other from opposing sides.
Right.
It starts to become more conversational. Mm-hmm. And then I feel safer if I'm the person sharing. And then I'm more likely to tell you more of my feelings, more of my thoughts, more of what's underneath that. Mm-hmm. So money dates could also be budgeting. So people have, we use You Need a Budget as a software tool here. I teach my clients You Need a Budget in my financial planning practice. And so sometimes money dates are, hey, honey, I got the budget going. Can you go through it with me? Let's look at it. Let's talk about it. I want to teach you how to use the app, or I want to talk about what our long-term dreams are so we can allocate our extra $1,000 a month into those buckets. That's another way to have a money date. Some people just have money dates just to check in and say, how are we doing? Yeah. Ooh, we weren't expecting that, whatever it is this month. How do we plan for that in the future? Because I tell people, every month is different. So the idea that you're going to have a budget and it's going to last for the entire year and be the same is not really true. Yeah. No, realistic is I'm going to estimate what I think things are going to be, and I'm going to flex with it. Ooh, I spent a little bit more on the dog this month because I forgot to get it groomed last month, and now I'm going to have to take that money from the clothing budget. Mm-hmm. Okay, no problem. You just flex. Uh-huh. But understanding that makes you feel empowered rather than like you're failing. It's like you don't fail if you didn't put enough money in the dog budget. You just get better and better as you tweak it.
Mm-hmm. And then more aware of how much you're using even. I was asking you earlier, how many people have a budget?
Oh, like 1 out of, 1,000.
Uh-huh. So
and even if they have one, it's not common. And even if they have a budget, like they've written down, this is what I spend, which is actually historic, rather than going forward, they don't refer back to it. So budgeting from our perspective here is it's a estimation of what you think you're going to spend, and then you come forward and look at what did I spend, or you hopefully look at it and say, I budgeted $800 for groceries and I've already spent $600, but it's only halfway through the month. So now I only have $200 for the remaining 2 weeks. What am I going to do about that? I have to be more cautious. I have to think it through. I have to, eat what's in the pantry
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm maintaining the equilibrium that I've set up in the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of what I love about budgeting is that you're not just thinking about the essential bills. You're thinking about, oh, I know the car can break down. I know that cars do break down. So I'm going to
They
plan
do.
for that. I'm going to plan for the house needing a repair. I'm going to plan for my body needing a repair. I'm going to plan for the vet bills. I'm going to plan for the vet. You know, I always tell people that the more dependents, animals, houses, cars, and anything that can break or cause more problems, children can be that.
Sure.
Um,
They're a liability.
they
in their
can
own
be
sense,
challenging. I mean, expensive. Whether even if they're the greatest kids, they can break their ankle or whatever.
Mhm.
All those things just mean you have more need for savings. If you're a single person, you have no dependents, you have no animals, you rent and you walk.
Wow.
Well, then you don't need nearly as much as the other person. You probably only need a couple $1,000s in the,
Mhm.
or you need a couple months of income to keep in your savings account. You don't have many things that are going to go bad, but you might be a single person who wants to go to school. Well, then you need to start saving for that.
Got a goal there.
So yeah, not many people have a budget. Not many people know how to make it an active, involved process. And certainly they don't know how to talk to their partners about it.
Yeah.
And so one of the things about You Need a Budget that's so beautiful is that it has, and you can share that so that it's easy for two people to be on the same page, to enter things from different locations, all going into the same budget, all aligning with one
Mhm.
budget, as opposed to we're living in our own little worlds and maybe they'll interact every now and then.
Yeah. Now, I've been budgeting for years, and I was doing it through Quicken, but now I understand from the classes here that that's still retroactive in me looking at what I already spent.
Yeah.
I don't really know until I'm done with the month to look back. And even I looked at least at the variance and kind of tweak things or tried to look at, if I'm spending more in utilities, does that mean I'm running the heater too much, or do I need more in utilities? It just takes that much to heat my
Right,
house.
right,
for
right.
goodness sakes. So
It's historic, right?
yeah.
So Quicken, QuickBooks, bookkeeping in general is historic. It's
Yeah.
what did I spend? Now you were doing the next step, which is, let me look at how I've spent and try to make some adjustments going forward. But You Need a Budget actually forces you to do that.
Yeah.
So it's forward thinking. It's cash flow management, forward cash flow management. I have X amount of dollars each month. Where am I going to put it? So that I'm planning for the future, I'm living in the present, and I'm taking care of my past obligations, bills, or debts.
Yeah.
And that's a really big understanding that helps people. They always say, well, I have a business and I do bookkeeping, I'm good. I'm like, no, you're not. Because how do you make choices going forward about what you're spending your money on? Or how do you know you can afford or not afford to go to that conference, to buy that piece of equipment, to hire an employee? If you don't plan for those things, how do you know?
Right.
You can't look historically because you didn't have that employee historically or that piece of equipment. You have to build the reserves so that you can pay for it.
Yeah. Cool. And I like that in You Need a Budget, you can also name things creatively. That might sound like trite, but to me it matters. Like, so instead of saying mortgage, I have sanctuary or gas, it's under adventure. And like my car moves me to the places where I want to go for adventures.
Right.
And it's small, but it makes a difference to me.
Yeah, my master category for my bills is called living in plenty.
Okay.
Because I want to feel like I'm living in, if I'm able to pay my electric bill, my gas bill, my water, my garbage, I have a beautiful house. That's living in plenty. It's like we forget. We wake up and the lights are on.
Yeah.
Thank
you
go
goodness.
to Central America and the lights are on half the time. You're like, wow, I didn't even appreciate that.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the biggest financial mishaps that you see in people's lives? Because you've been able to observe people more than we do. People don't talk about money hardly at all. I say way more than sex even is money talked about. So what are the biggest pitfalls that people can get into?
Being afraid to talk about money with either current partners, spouses, or people they're dating.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a really big, when you just lay it out on the table you quickly know what that person's all about. You either like, they either can handle your frank, open conversation about money, or they get weird about it. And you don't necessarily want to marry that person who is going to have a bunch of weird baggage about money. We all have our baggage, but you want to know what it is.
Right.
And yet I've noticed a lot of times people just won't share. Like, they won't say, that really bothers me when you spend so much money on toys. This is a woman talking to her husband. That's the common thing. Or a man saying, we really don't have the money for you to buy clothes every week or whatever it is. And yet there's so much conflict avoidance and inability to understand the undercurrent. So a lot of times that kind of spending is coming from needs that aren't being met in the relationship, and they don't want to talk about the need. Like, I just really need more attention. But since I'm not getting that attention, I'm going to go shopping, and I'm going to rack up debt, which is then going to create resentment. And then you're actually going to pay attention to me, even though it's negative. It's like, that's pretty shitty.
But really, I'd rather
just make out.
Yeah. Or we went out on a date or whatever it might be. Yeah.
So I see that. I see people not wanting to face their own financial limitations, that instead of saying, I have $10 between now and next week, so I have a couple choices. I can spend nothing. I can sell things in my home to make more money. I can get in creative. People just, I'll just get that other. I mean, I see it here. I'm like,
whip out the plastic. Is
right. Well, it's like, I know people's budgets because I work with them, and I'm then thinking, probably not a good day to buy pie. And then we have a conversation about it, and then the next day they're bringing in their tea, or they're doing something different and making a different choice. And I really appreciate that, because then it's when you're actively budgeting, and the minute you spend that money, you're putting it into your budget. You're like, I only have $1 left of my Sacred Money Studios pie account or whatever.
Right. Well, that's the other thing that I'm still on the learning curve with. And that's, as soon as you get your wallet out is when you need to get your app out to see, do I have the money?
Right.
That's that part of looking forward, is really to, number one, even know where you're at, which the app helps you with that. But you can't just do it historically later and really be responsible for the spending right then.
Yeah. I mean, your biggest mishaps are, honestly, credit cards are just a humongous nightmare for people. It's just, I often coach people to just stop. I don't care if you're getting rewards. I don't care. Right. Take a 4-month vacation from that buying in June and paying it in July, which we call float, by the way. That's that definition of float. I'm not living with my current expenses. I'm floating it to the next month, which means I never really know what my month's bills are, because I don't know how big that credit card bill is going to be.
Right.
And I'm paying it in July for June, and then I'm trying to make sure I have enough money for August. It doesn't work. So there are people that are very successful with putting all their expenses on credit cards, when what they're putting there are their fixed expenses. Right? So if you put your fixed expense, right, they're predictable. It's like, okay, that's always going to be $800, give or take, because that's my utilities, my phone bill, my whatever. Fine. Build your miles that way. If you can manage it, pay it on time, and you do it before the end of the month. So I always tell people, if you're going to use that credit card for miles, you have to make the payment early in the month. You have to pay it off before the month is over, so that those two things are happening in the same month.
Cool.
It's a being in charge. It's like saying, I actually, when you know that when you use a debit card, it's coming out of your account right away.
Right.
Like, you better have it in there.
Right. Sometimes you got to look before you do whatever you're doing.
Yeah. So just the act of taking all your credit cards out of your wallet is powerful.
Yeah.
Take them all out. Just like live without it for a while. See what it feels like. Not because I want you to be in scarcity, but because I want you to be in reality.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'm certainly a firm believer in calling on the abundance that surrounds us, but the abundance can come in lots of different ways. It comes in, I mean, my friend just gave me a free ticket to go see my mom in New York.
Oh, nice.
Like, that was an amazing sense of just like, wow, that made that so much easier.
Mhm.
And it didn't come in the form of dollars. It came in the form of a plane ticket, which could equate to dollars, of course. But it's that
Absolutely.
sense of like letting it in. How do we use our creativity to live where we are instead of acting as if we live somewhere else?
Mhm.
And then you can work towards living in that someplace else where you have more access, more comfort, more plentifulness.
Mhm.
But don't live like you're there until you're actually there.
Got it. Yeah. Now, what if somebody lives within their means? Do they still need a budget?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me why. I'm
Well, so
asking this
some
on
peop-
behalf of one of our participants.
Yeah, so some people are really, they do a good job of not overspending.
Yeah.
But budgets do two things. Budgets do they give you the act of containment. So it's a container to put a limitation around spending. So if I say, I've looked at all my expenses and all the things I want to save for, and what I can afford or what fits is an $800 budget for groceries. That's a container. I've determined that $800 fits because I've allocated every dollar. In YNAB, we say every dollar has a job. And so even your savings dollars are given jobs. You want to have zero in your budget that doesn't have a job. Everything gets allocated. So it's a container. But the other piece about budgeting that I think is delightful is what I call the permission slip. So if giving has been difficult for me because I always feel like, oh, I don't have enough money to give it away.
Right.
If I budget $25 a month, then it's a permission slip to give the $25 away.
Sweet.
It's also a permission slip if I'm trying to honor the values. So if I say that my top value is family, but I barely ever do anything with my family,
Right. That's great.
which happens a lot.
to
I say
realize
everything
that
else is more important. Well, if I budget $100 for family, then I get to say to my family, how are we going to spend this money? Let's do something fun. What would we do for $100? We get to do that this month, and we're not going to let it go to the next month unless we want to take a trip and we're going to let it accumulate.
Then you're aiming towards that goal.
But then you're teaching your family, your children, whoever, you're teaching them how to think that way,
Mhm.
how to have a new mindset.
Cool.
That it matters, we matter, and having that $100 gives us an opportunity to go to the cabin, go out to eat, go ride the roller coaster,
Mhm.
go bowling, buy a game, whatever it is,
Mhm.
right? So to me, permission slips, a lot of women in particular need permission slips for things like they have no problem paying for their basic expenses, but they have a really hard time paying for clothing.
Or self-care. Kind of
Self-care, like
pampering
getting a
things.
massage, like, oh, that's just they have parents that were just like, that is just
Bouquet of flowers or whatever it might
Extravagant.
be. Yeah.
So if you identify that the things that make you happiest are fresh flowers once a week, and yet you never budget for fresh flowers, how do you ever get to feel like that's what plentifulness is? So one of the budget items I have a master category that's called, I can't remember what I've called it recently, but I keep changing them. But let's just say it's living in glorious plenitude or whatever I want to call it. Then I would list the things that make me feel like I'm living the most amazing life. So for me, that might mean I get to take an art retreat once a quarter, and I have fresh flowers every week, and I get a massage once a week. Now, if I get that massage, which has happened for me by trading, then check it off. It's good. I get it.
Yeah.
I don't need to pay for it because
Right.
I'm trading. Same with flowers. It doesn't matter how I get it, but by putting it there and making it a category,
That's
I'm
great.
acknowledging how important it is.
Mhm.
And then when I have extra money and I've given every dollar a job, but there's still $100 there, I can go, woohoo, I got money for flowers.
Mhm.
I've got money to, go buy that cute skirt I just saw.
Mhm.
I've got money to do the things that just light me up and make me feel like life really is abundant.
Mhm.
But I'm not doing it at the detriment of saving for the future, paying my bills, getting rid of my debts, or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the courses, excuse me, that I took here was your small business course. And that was so great because we had a community of women around the table that I got to meet. And just hearing their stories, it's always so much easier to see a lesson when somebody else is learning it.
Right.
Like someone who just maybe wanted to prove to their husband that their business was worthy, or someone else who gives and gives and gives, hoping people will love her, which certainly I have done myself as well.
And pay her.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
You give and give and give, hoping that somebody will just pay you more.
Yeah. But you
usually
maybe
gonna happen.
never ask for more either.
Exactly.
So that was really helpful. And it was this wonderful combination of talking about our businesses and what mattered, and then also having Paige come talk about bookkeeping.
Mm-hmm.
And in that talk, I started getting very anxious because she's saying, okay, what kind of business licenses do you guys have? And so LLC,
Business entity.
business entity. Okay.
Right? Because the license is different.
Yeah. For me, it actually ended up being that I had a business entity that doesn't match my business. And so that hasn't been easy, but thank God I know it.
Right.
And I'm planning for and making some changes, including, looking at maybe a new tax person, perhaps, et cetera. So I know that's a course that you led. I don't know, is that something that cycles around repeatedly for small businesses?
Yeah, we do it here next month. Actually, it's going to be different in that Jen is going to teach us based on the Law of Divine Compensation, which is the book that we so love and has been a major.
I've heard of that book, but
it's Marianne Williamson.
Mhm.
And she really just addresses sort of the spiritual aspects of work, career, calling, money. And it's a really powerful book. I listen to it a lot. I just listen because I find that her prayers and her approach helps me to think about staying in alignment, even when the ideas that I've put out into the world feel like they're meeting resistance, or I'm not where I need to be.
The flow's not happening.
The flow's not happening the way I want it to happen. There's something about the way she talks about that's helped me to keep honoring the vision, keep doing the work,
right,
and stay open to faith,
sure,
in the way that will work. And so we're doing that class in September.
Okay.
I'm going to come back and teach again, but because my mom is so sick, I didn't want to commit to anything until I know where she's at. And so, so that, because my whole approach, of course, is more of the boots on the ground part of business. It is like, what's the entity? How are we separating business and personal? How are we saving enough money for taxes? At the same time that we're looking at goals, intentions, bigger pieces around, why am I in this business? What am I passionate about?
Yeah, you did a great job of doing that. And that's where I could see your artistic background and your therapist and your financial planning just all come together as we went around the table. I mean, it was like, whoa, very, very powerful. So you talked a little bit about Wild Money. Now, is this something that you do have or will have courses here about that? Because that's something that I probably would like the support with.
I'm going to be teaching a weekend workshop this September.
Okay.
I've decided that because my mom is sick and I have to fly back and forth, not to do it as a weekly class, but to do it as a weekend class.
Okay. Yeah.
So people will come in, we'll work through probably the first 3 chapters. It's not really possible to do all 6 chapters in 2.5 days. So we're going to do that at the end of September. And then, because what I'm launching, again, it's like I've had this dream, but I haven't, because I'm trying to navigate where my energy needs to be.
Sure.
With my mom.
There's always choices.
I'm developing the curriculum for the Sacred Money Coaching Institute, which is a year-long training in how to use, you need a budget, how to coach it, how to do and teach Wild Money, and then how to use the tapping process to clear old mindsets and belief systems and enter into new relationships that you want to have with money. So that's sort of the big picture of what we're doing, but it might be the next 6 months might just be a class here and a class there that will be part of the curriculum as we go.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now is a good time for me to ask if there are any questions from the group. If there are, please type those in. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you, what other courses are you guys offering through Sacred Money Studios?
So we have a class coming up. We do lots of one-off classes. So just like yours, like you came in and talked about how to turn your home into an Airbnb. And we teach on membership. Members get access to all of our budgeting classes and our classes that are based in using the tapping process and the small business class. But then we're also teaching classes, like one Thursday is on how to be a trustee. So what does it mean in an estate plan? If you're creating an estate plan and you say, hey, Kathy, can I just make you my trustee? How do you feel about that? Most people don't have any clue what you're asking that person to do. It's a big, big job. It's not a very pleasant, fun job. And so I found that by having this class, one of the things that people get from it is, holy shit, somebody nominated me for that job and I didn't even realize what I said yes to. And, I thought about putting Susie in that position, but she really doesn't have the right skill set for it. Maybe I need to make sure that she knows that she can decline that if she doesn't feel like it, because you can. And most people don't tell those people that you don't have to accept the position. You can say, you can basically say, no, thank you. I don't think I have the skill set or the time or whatever. So this class is really wonderful. It's taught by a local attorney, and she just teaches all the different aspects and responsibilities of being in that role. So we do these really kind of fundamental classes about your financial life. And then we do fun things like how to sell your art online. And we have a class on essential oils and how to use essential oils in opening up your capacity to experience abundance. So it's kind of like we have the spiritual classes. We have a class on spirituality and bankruptcy, kind of the spiritual approach, how to look at bankruptcy as a spiritual journey. And so there's many different pieces. And as more members in the community come forward, we have more opportunities to just learn and engage is what I love. We had a class, or not a class, but a presentation on Sunday with two storytellers who told stories, Jewish stories that were related to money, and then their own personal stories.
Oh, sweet.
And it was wonderful. And then they basically told the story and then, just take that in. Like, we don't want to bombard you with story after story. We want you to just let it sink in for a couple minutes and then process it. And then they would tell the next story and then we'd talk about it. And it was like,
oh, wow,
so rich.
Yeah.
And that's where we want to move more in that direction, where we're doing more ceremony, more storytelling, more of an opportunity to express both the good and the challenging stories that we've had in our lives, and just give them voice. Because by doing that, we learn.
Great.
That's the value.
Sounds
like you got a question there.
Class. Yeah. So Miriam is asking if you offer any of these online.
I do not at the moment. I have done it in the past. I don't love the online environment. I just find it less engaging. So
maybe you and I still should talk afterwards.
There we go.
Because I happen to love the, there's limitations too.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. Right. But we'll have to sort of brainstorm and see if there is a way to offer it to other people.
Like I said, I mean, I've had students all over the world, and it's just and it's wonderful being able to have a student in India and Singapore and Tokyo, whatever. I just want to touch you. I just want to have more of that physicality, even though I might be able to see their face. It's hard to do
we have
drawings.
So many great resources here in Portland, just in general, and a lot of the topics that we go over. So I know that, if you're in Nebraska,
I know you're definitely disadvantaged.
Like this, it's probably not going to be easy to find. So
so I guess my answer to that question is that, Miriam, I would say, if somebody came to me and said, I have 50 students, they're online, would you teach? And here's how much I pay you. I'd say yes.
Yeah.
What I find hard about it is the enrollment process and the technology side of it.
Yeah.
So, so Miriam, I don't know where you are, but if you want to help us with that, if somebody gave me a captive audience, I'd happily teach it.
I see I have a low battery.
You do.
And I thought I did everything right, but I just didn't hook up my power source to my computer. So we'll see if we can make that go away.
There we go.
Cool. So good question, Miriam. And we'll brainstorm a little. And how does someone who is in Portland go about participating in Sacred Money Studio?
Right. So Sacred Money Studio is modeled after the yoga studio.
Oh, okay.
And because what my philosophy is that what we need is a place to practice. And
yes,
so much of what's offered in the world of financial education is, here, let me show you what budgeting is. 2 hours, now go home and do it.
Good luck.
Yeah, awesome. But nobody does. And so the idea of having a membership where you can come to unlimited classes, you can come whenever it fits into your schedule, and you just drop in and you sit down and you start budgeting with other people, with a coach, and then you leave with that same feeling you leave the yoga studio, which is like, wow, I did it. I worked out for an hour. It feels awesome. I feel more peaceful. I feel like I've exercised those muscles and I'm good. And that's what I wanted. I wanted a place where people had that feeling. So it's right now, until we have the first 100 members sign up, we have a special of $49 a month.
Wow.
And that's an unlimited access to all the classes. We offer classes 6 days a week, morning, noon, night. We try to fit everything. As we get more membership, we'll have more classes offered. So right now we're just trying to build and offer as much as we can, as frequently as we can, even though the membership is typically now it's 4 to 5 people in a class. Eventually we'll probably have 10 people in a class. And then we have to have 2 coaches. And
right.
But that's how you can engage in that way. And then we have the classes that are offered by the community are mostly either free or by donation. And so I'm always encouraging people who come, like I did with you, to
that was so
support
nice.
this person and make donations so that they can feel supported by you. And we do the same with musicians and anybody else who comes here and shares their talents.
Yeah, so often on Fridays or Saturdays you have musicians.
We have live music. We're going to be doing open mics in the fall. We're going to be doing, I want to do a poetry slam, even though I'm not a poet, but I love listening to poetry slams. We're going to just do stories where people just come in and just tell a story. We just go around the circle, just like tell a story from your life about money.
Yeah.
And just see what comes
I've got
out.
a few juicy quotes.
Right. You don't have to plan it out. Just tell the story.
Yeah.
And we learn from each other so well. And that's what I find so, why teaching in a group has been so powerful. The Wild Money process is incredibly enhanced by having other people in the room.
Yeah.
And for people to hear, oh, wow, I never thought of that, or that's never occurred to me. Like, I could draw my picture like that, or I could think about that, or it's helping us to stretch beyond our own little boxes of mindset that we inherited or developed along the way. So, yeah.
Great. Okay, and then you even mentioned that, I don't know if you guys know who Sark is, but Sark is going to be in town this weekend. So she will be coming here to the studios to be determined which day, but if you're not on the calendar, you definitely want to get on the Sacred Money Studios calendar.
Facebook page. The Facebook page is the best place for our calendar.
Okay. So I'll put a link to the Facebook page below, and certainly you can stay in the loop that way.
But this is how the universe works. So I sent Sark my books. So we named the pie shop Prosperity Pie because she wrote a book called Prosperity Pie.
Oh, I didn't even know.
And I have always loved that. That's her book about money. And so when I published Wild Money, I sent her my books and never heard a word. And then today, 3 years after sending her my books, I made a post on Facebook about the challenges of being an entrepreneur and how overwhelmed and exhausted I was. And she wrote to me and said, I'm so sorry I never got back to you. Can we meet?
Cool.
I've had your books, I've worked your process, I tell everybody about it. And I'm like, who knew? And it was a great, I felt like the universe responded very quickly to my willingness to be transparent about what it's like to be a business owner. And so I wrote back and I said, well, so if you're going to be here, why don't we do something together? Why don't we just say, hey, come and we'll talk and we'll just have a conversation. And she was like, great, let's do it. So cool. We're scheduling it at this moment for this weekend. So there are moments when that kind of serendipity just, that feels like abundance to me, when that sort of just shows up. Like having Sark here feels so supportive, and she obviously has a much larger what do you call it,
Audience.
audience than I do. She's been developing it for 20 years. And to know that she was delighted to come here and be in conversation with me about it was
Yeah.
super exciting.
Yeah.
So
Very, very
if anybody's
cool.
going to be around, Miriam, you're going to just have to fly in for the weekend because, I mean, Chicago's wonderful, but Portland's even better now.
Yeah. She's been wanting to come visit me, so you can stay at my place, Miriam.
There you go. Airbnb.
Yeah. And I won't even charge you because you've always been so faithful and loyal. You're amazing. Okay. Well, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in, whether that was live or on the replay. And thank you, Luna, for your
course.
time and your generous, creative, alive spirit. I see that that's what you bring to the world, and just really appreciate that you've taken the time to have this vision, but not just have it inside or in a book, but physically manifest around us to make a difference for me
Yeah.
and the other people who I have met in classes and people that I don't even know that are in other classes
Yeah.
too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Mhm. Great. So we will see you next month when our topic is love and sexuality. So we're
Fun
talking
topic.
about the juicy things this month
One
and
of my
next month.
favorite topics.
Yeah. So you have to stay tuned
All
to
right.
find out more about that.
All right.
Thanks, guys. See ya
Bye.
on the Facebook group.